Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Talking Success. Following on the theme of last week, we're delighted to have the team from Vodacom Business with us today in huge support of the African Fintech Festival and the South African Fintech Awards, which are taking place, let's say next month, well, it is almost next month, on the 24th and 25th of November in Pretoria. We were delighted to have the support of Vodacom Business, a tremendous partner who, without them, we really couldn't have, well, we won't be able to pull this off. So a big thank you to Kevin, Peter, Ati, and the rest of the team. Today, we're talking about a subject that I think a lot of people will have heard of. Well, if you haven't heard of it, you've probably been living somewhere else. AI, right? Now, I think when people talk about AI, can generally go, oh, ChatGPT or Notebook LLM or Claude. But let's look at it now from a business perspective, right? And more importantly, what is the return on investment? And I think that's the question that a lot of executives ask is, okay, well, we have this amazing tool set. We have access potentially to this amazing tool set, but what does it mean for bottom line or even top line growth? And today we're here to answer that. We're here to give hopefully some insights into the world of AI, what that means as Vodacom Business, where AI potentially is going, and really where Vodacom Business fits into this whole kind of infrastructure and environment. So I'm delighted to welcome back Kevin. Kevin, thank you so much. Good to see you again. We're also joined by Ati, and we're joined by Peter as well, who I'm going to let them give their own intros in terms of what they do, where they fit within the business. And naturally, I'm going to start with ladies first. So I think a very warm welcome. I know it's not too warm in Joburg today, but a very warm welcome. If you could kindly introduce yourself, that'd be amazing, and just give our audience a little bit of background in terms of you and what you do at Vodacom Business.
All right, thank you for that. My name is Ngubevana. I'm actually part of Vodacom Group, where we've been tasked to implement AI and automation across all the markets where Vodacom operates. Wow. And so of late, and part of our Vision 2030, which is a long-term strategy, we've been asked to see to what extent can we take some of the capabilities from an AI perspective that we've built in-house to then commercialize them. And that's where the relationship with the Vodacom Business team comes in, where I've been engaging with some of our enterprise customers to find opportunities to actually help them accelerate on their AI journey.
Wonderful. Well, that sounds like a super exciting job. I think there's a lot of people that can be very envious of that job, getting to play kind of with AI at kind of a group level within Vodacom, and then translating that into kind of a commercial offering. Fascinating. We'll drill down that a little bit later on. Peter, yourself?
Yeah, so Peter here. So I am from Enterprise Vodacom Business. It's been a 7-year journey here. Did a couple of crazy things, from scaling the IoT division on complex solutions we take to customers, and spend time on customer or chief sales from an enterprise perspective, which gave me an exposure to many of the customers in public and private sector. Then currently what I do, I am accountable for all the enterprise solutions from fixed to IoT, and the go-to-market on the solution architecture side.
Okay, well, that's a broad role, if I've ever heard one. It sounds like you spin lots of plates at the same time. But again, we'll find out a little bit more about that later. I'd love to delve into some of the enterprises you're helping and what those solutions look like. Kevin, I know you did your intro last week, but let's do it again for completeness' sake. Over to you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for making me famous, Darren. I really enjoyed the first podcast, so hopefully this is going to be as enjoyable as the last one. My name is Kevin Odudoh. I currently head up the business development function within Vodacom Business. And I'm lucky enough to be working with some amazing colleagues like Ati and Peter. In my previous role, over the last couple of years, like 4 to 5 years, I was heading up the financial services sector within Vodacom Business. And that actually gave me a lot of exposure in the South African financial services in general, from, the Fintech to, large banks and insurance companies, as you know them. But before that, I actually worked for Vodafone Global Enterprise. And what we did then is that we had global multinational clients that we used to work with to help them scale across Africa and across the world. So we did quite a bit of travel, but my interest actually narrowed down to, again, financial services. So we had quite a number of large financial services clients that we used to manage across the continent and across the globe, and I really enjoyed that. So I'm really, really happy to be here again to talk about how we can actually scale that value to our fintech ecosystem as well.
Kevin, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, look, if we can narrow this a little bit, because I think if we talk about AI from a global perspective and from an enterprise perspective, maybe we look at governments and we look at all the different types of user cases within AI. We're going to be here for the next probably 2 weeks, right, and longer. So if we can narrow it and talk a little bit about fintech financial services, and again, maybe we can start domestically here in South Africa. What is the problem or the challenge that you're looking to solve as Vodacom Business? I know Ati mentioned that you've deployed, or Vodacom Group have deployed AI and automation within the group function, and then looking to commercialize that. What does that mean from a financial services perspective, Kevin?
Yeah. So no, thanks for that question, Darren. So the first thing that comes to mind, like we mentioned in the last podcast, is actually ensuring that there is inclusion, or we drive inclusion from a financial services perspective. If anything needs to be taken out of this podcast, is our passion for financial and digital inclusion as an organization. So that's something that we're really passionate about. I would say the second thing is pretty much looking at how do we build or enhance that trust in the financial services space, and especially in the fintech space. Traditionally, some of the large brands from the banking perspective have really gained that trust over a long period of time. But you're seeing that a lot of the fintechs, especially in not so regulated or very, regulatory, an environment that is changing so much from a regulatory perspective, might not necessarily have the trust that they require. And then, probably the last one from our side is, how do we ensure that this actually returns what they're, from an ROI perspective, they get the returns that they need from deploying this AI solution. So I would say that from a fintech point of view, we are looking at solving those, 3 or 4 major concerns that we've actually seen happening in the market.
Okay, thank you. Ati, if I may come to you before I jump on to Peter. So the group has developed clearly some very sophisticated modeling and tools that have been used to ensure there's an ROI within the business of deploying this type of technology. Could you give us some examples of what that looks like, and specifically those that you've taken kind of commercially and are now kind of a commercial offering that sit under sort of Peter and Kevin?
All right. So I think when I talk or think about AI in the Vodacom sense and automation, is to appreciate that it's anchored in the understanding of why we want to do it, right? So as part of the organization, we want to enable growth, we want to enable simplicity, and we want to enable profitable capabilities that can scale. So the moment we understand the why, then we're able to be led, right, as to decisioning in terms of the solutions that we build. So these cases that we built and capabilities that particularly speak to the fintech spaces, if you can imagine how, as a telco, we almost have such rich data in terms of customer behavior, which means that we are able to actually understand your behavior in the credit space, right? So there's a trend that has existed for the longest time where we are able to actually understand your behavioral attributes in terms of us being able to extend credit to you as an individual outside of actually using the traditional credit bureau kind of scoring. Yeah. So that is where the telco credit score comes in. So we found that within our South African market, and also in fact all of the markets that we operate, we've been able to unlock access or inclusivity in terms of funding and credit inclusivity to customers that are traditionally in the thin book space. So that means that they haven't traditionally been participating in the space. We are now able to actually extend a different lens in terms of their behavior, which is outside of the traditional ways of actually extending credit. And also, if you think about it in the African context, credit scoring is not something that's traditionally available. So by us being able to look at the traditional fintech behavior within our M-Pesa platform, together with the telco behavioral attributes, we're able to actually create a credit score behaviorally for our customers, which means that we are now starting to extend light touch funding to industries or segments of customers that traditionally wouldn't have been included. But for predominantly, we've been playing in the extending credit in the small microloans, and also in being able to grant cell phone connectivity to customers that traditionally would have been excluded. So for us, we see this as a major opportunity in terms of then extending that telco credit capability to be a supplementary capability in the fintech space from an inclusion perspective, because there's a very big segment of citizens in the country that are not in the credit space. So we want to unlock that capability, therefore enabling the top line for a lot of organizations in our enterprise space. Then another use case I can think of is, by virtue of us trying to increase our top line and adoption from a fintech perspective or financial inclusion, that also means that we're increasing our chances of fraud, right, and risk. Because as a function, the more customers you have, the greater exposure you are to potential fraud. So what we've then done is actually built a revolutionary proactive fraud identification model, which is one of the first in an AWS platform in the African continent. And so what we're seeing in our space, and this is a use case we are consuming, so I think that becomes very important, is that we want to be able to go to the market with capabilities that we have built, and we're also seeing value too, so that it makes the conversation a bit easier from a credibility perspective, because a lot of customers still see us as a traditional telco. So the moment we go to market with evidence of us literally drinking our own champagne, it makes it quite easy for us to have these conversations. So from a proactive fraud capability, we're able to think about it this way, that if Darren's cell phone number has certain attributes in terms of behavior, we're able to pick up trends within a big data AI and perspective, and we would be able to identify that these attributes are linked to fraud capabilities. Then by us being able to understand who you connect with, right, from a network perspective, we're also able to pick up the syndicated nature of your behavior. So the likelihood that a fraudster that has been confirmed to be a fraudster based on our model and confirmed is not engaging with other individuals is very slim to none. So we then find that through our innovative proactive fraud models, we're also able to identify a network of potential fraudsters. So what we're then seeing, and this is a capability that we haven't yet launched to our enterprise space, but we are in talks with certain enterprise customers, is that also if your number is used in the telco space for fraud, likelihood you're also going to try and defraud a financial services institution. So we want to then be able to expose that API capability. So if you think about it from an onboarding perspective, that when a customer is applying for a loan, some of the data points that they input is a cell phone number. So if they can then tap into our database in terms of an API and try and check, is Darren's number part of the identified fraudsters, we could then be able, as part of the onboarding journey, identify and notify that said credit lender that this customer has been flagged. So that then becomes an indicator for that entity to decide whether to carry on with the credit granting or not. So you'd find that those two capabilities by themselves have a very strong enabling factor of saying, if we are able to expose and enable credit scoring from a top line perspective, that means that your revenue is increasing, but at the same time, we're protecting your base from a cost perspective so that you don't increase your loan base, but then increase your never paid or non-payment in your books from a fraud perspective. So that becomes an interesting conversation when we have sessions with our enterprise customers, because we've thought about the fact that we understand the why the AI should be adopted, but also making sure that we deploy these solutions in a responsible manner, that we don't expose our organization and our enterprise customers to more risk by them adopting these AI capabilities.
Fascinating. I think those user cases around the fraud, given South Africa, has kind of breaking news from last week, is off the FATF grey list. But that doesn't mean that work is over. Far from it. It means that it needs to make sure that it never, rears its head again. Same in other countries that Vodacom operates in. where, there is still grey listing, there is still a lot of fraud that happens across the world. I mean, it's not just an African thing, right? And being able to prevent that and being able to, I suppose, be proactive rather than reactive is definitely something notable. Peter, I'd like to ask you a question, and I appreciate we've not necessarily prepped for this. So if compliance people say, no, you can't answer this, then I'll understand and I'll move on. But if you look at it from a Popia, from an ethical AI governance perspective, what Aditi was saying about having this sort of data lake of information, how does that sit? And how do you innovate without sort of crossing the compliance barrier, especially when it comes to new technologies such as AI, such as IoT? We'll come on to maybe some other topics a bit later on, but how do you ensure the governance?
Yeah, I think thanks. It's a great question. So, and there are a couple of examples on that. So I think obviously, as a reputable organization, we do value the brand and we do value their governance frameworks that we need to operate under. So I think typically then what happens is that we work a lot around how we anonymize the data so that then it allows the innovation to happen, because the insights that are required to innovate, we are able to crystallize on that. There are a couple examples of that, like during the COVID time, if you recall. So we had to work with government quite a lot around how do you identify hotspots of areas, and you can use the data to be able to effect that, right? So even today, you are able to do it. That's why we are able to leverage the data on some of the use cases that we are working on and we are looking to build moving forward. Like in IoT, as an example, you take that most of the telematics companies, their data is flowing through our network from a connectivity perspective. But then we don't need to know who the users are. But with that amount of data, what can you do? You can inform traffic route management. You can inform user-based type insurance offerings that you are able to create at the back of that. But I think it's getting into a very tricky space, because now where we're starting to get a convergence of a number of things around that are bridging on that. Because today, I mean, we're looking at another technology around where, for an example, the smart cameras, smartphones today, just by taking a picture using your smartphone, it can be able to sort of build a health record for you, right? So it's sensitive things around how do you get the right consent and what do you do by capturing that data in a cloud. So I think in a nutshell, we do work within those governance frameworks that are available based on our brand and reputation, to be able to innovate within those constraints. And obviously, the customer consent on some of the use cases becomes very, very critical to allow us to be able to scale moving forward.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit of a minefield. I mean, there's ever-changing kind of legislation. I think as these new technologies are coming into play, the regulator needs to keep up, and it's very difficult. I think from a regulator's perspective, and you guys probably know, we do a lot of work with the SARB. Trying to keep them sort of up to date with all the different sort of technology that comes in, and stable coins and real world digital assets and IoT and all of these kinds of things. These things don't happen overnight. So I guess it's a very sort of fine balancing act of staying compliant as well as sort of innovating. Interesting space to be in. Kevin, can I ask you a question? Last week when we did a recording, I think you used the term Vodacom Business is a neutral orchestrator. I think you used those terms. If you didn't, then I've just given you a new phrase. Can you just unpack that a little bit? We've heard from Ati, we've heard from Peter in terms of kind of the compliance side and some of the products that have been commercialized. But where does Vodacom Business sit within the ecosystem?
I remember saying the neutral orchestrator, though. Thank you for reminding us. It was probably close enough. But Darren, that's actually an interesting one, because what we see ourselves is exactly that, a neutral orchestrator. So what that means in our world is that we understand that, first of all, especially in the sense of data and AI. So data needs rails, right? You need to have a platform that actually your data can be ingested, or you can actually get the data from, and then you can ingest that data and then use it, and store it and manage it in a secure platform, and a platform that actually aligns with the regulatory requirements, especially when it comes to privacy, as Peter mentioned earlier. So those platforms that actually create that neutral orchestrator play for us are very critical for us, and that's pretty much where we come in. So as you know, as a telco, we've been dealing with data throughout our lives as an organization, and we've actually built that capability of being able to store data quite securely. First of all, ingest data from multiple sources, store it very securely, and then use it in a highly regulated environment to get to the outcomes that our customers, our partners, be it other businesses or ourselves, actually need to use it for. So that's pretty much what this is all about. And then if you just take it further to, how we potentially bring this to life in our products and services, it might sound a bit obvious, but Peter also touched on it previously, is that how do we create platforms that create a neutral playground for, let's say, the fintechs to come and plug in and get the most out of this data, or get the most out of this information that we have about an ecosystem that they want to play in, whether it's in the, like Peter mentioned, usage-based insurance, whether it's in the fraud mitigation space, or any other space that you probably want to play in, including payment space through our partners like Xlink. So that is pretty much where we'd like to play and where we'd want to position ourselves in this fintech ecosystem.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'm going to ask a bit of an open question, and please, anyone feel free to answer. The week before last, I was at an office in Santon at an event, and got onto the Wi-Fi, and then was kind of researching for something. And yes, everyone, I do use ChatGPT. And I went to log in, and I went to ask a question. It said, "No, sorry, you're not allowed." Right, so it was banned on the sort of the internal environment. I think there's a lot of questions, perhaps from fintechs and from industry generally, about sort of data sovereignty and how that works from a security perspective. There's been lots of commentary around organizations, individuals in organizations uploading private information to, whether it be OpenAI, whether it be Anthropic, whoever it may be, and that being then in the public domain, or being able to be read by sort of AI. So I think there's some sort of excos out there that are saying, "Oh, hang on a minute, is this safe enough for us to use?" What would be your answer to that, and to your response in terms of maybe what you've seen work in group, and then what you're deploying to customers?